Hello, I'm ShieldWar100 and welcome back to my wargaming channel. The culmination of the Normandy campaign saw the German 7th Army defeated and falling back eastwards towards the River Seine. A range of factors, including the very obliging German counterattack towards the American breakout in Operation Cobra, left the Axis forces precariously caught inside a shrinking pocket, with British, Canadian, Polish and American forces applying pressure from multiple sides. The ability of both sides to react to ever-changing circumstances was now paramount as the Allies attempted to close the pincers of the trap in the east, whilst the Germans fought to keep the passageway to safety open. In today's Chain of Command Battle Report, I'm going to portray an attack by the US 90th Division, the Tough Hombres, against a German rearguard as they make their advance towards Chamblois. Let's see the forces available to each side. Well, first let's review what's in store for the Germans with the American forces just here. We have a standard infantry platoon, as you can see, consisting of 3 full squads, junior, leader and 2 teams respectively. There you go. And interspersed between them obviously is the armoured support, so we have an M4 Sherman and a Stuart here as well, and yeah, both should give the Germans some problems unless the Germans can bring one of their many anti-tank weapons to bear upon them, but we'll see how that ends up for them. Otherwise you've got the 2 senior leaders, the bazooka team, standard for any American platoon in this particular part of the theatre in the rules, and I also gave them a 60mm mortar as well at the back, just to help them crack anything that's taking too much cover. Okay, yeah, so a nice sort of standard American force, I think, all counting as regular, of course. Yeah, the 90th Division didn't really have a particularly sterling reputation at this point in the war, but it would go on to become one of the more celebrated and tough American units by the end, so regular seems fair to me. And here are the Germans who'll be taking on the advancing Americans. It's a bit of a scratch force I've put together. It doesn't follow the standard force organisation chart, but I think it represented a decent blocking force anyway. It's based upon the standard German platoon, except it only has 2 of the standard hair squads, including their light machine gun teams as well. But yeah, there's the senior leader, a Panzerschreck team, and then we're into the wild and wacky world of what we got. So I've gone with a pack over here with a 75mm gun. A pretty powerful weapon, should be more than a match for anything the Allies can throw at them, but yeah, we'll see how it depends how it deploys and what happens to it really. And furthermore, we've got a little infantry gun at the back because I really like the model. Not quite as powerful, but certainly enough to keep the American infantry pinned down. And a little, my favourites, the little 222 armoured car as well, for what it's worth. It's been left behind and is just looking to hold up the 90th Division as much as possible, get them to slow down on their advance to keep the pocket open as long as possible. Okay, let's have a quick look at the board. As a rearguard action game, the table is actually laid out, well, we're playing the lengthways of the board rather than from long table edge to long table edge. We're playing from the short table edge to the short table edge. So that's why I'm standing here, and the 90th Division have been advancing up this road, and they're going through this as yet unnamed small French town, okay, or village. Okay, and yes, this is where the Germans are going to try and hold them up for a few hours, get them to fall back and regroup. Okay. So yeah, there's quite a lot of terrain on the board. I like that. Some new additions from my collection to show off, and yeah, I like it a lot. It should be an interesting sort of game, and yeah, the Germans will be at this far end over here. Let me just show you. So yeah, they'll start deploying up this end, and their jump off points will be somewhere further forward. I'm about to do the patrol phase. The Americans will be coming on from over here, and yeah, we'll see how. I'll show you what happened at the end of the patrol phase in just a moment. Okay, jump off points are all down, so let's show you where they are. You've got, for the Americans, they've been pegged back a little bit due to the nature of the terrain and having 4 patrol markers compared to the Axis 3, but yeah, they've got one jump off point snuzzled into this hedgerow here, one just behind the wall on this mini field, shall we say, and there's one, well, I'll come round, and it's in the woods just back here, so they've had to kind of weight their attack a little bit to their right coming up the board, but there is plenty of cover here, so that makes sense as well. For the Germans, they also a bit pegged back. They only get 2 to place further up the board. There's one, as you can see, behind that building there. It's quite well placed there to put them, any deploying troops, into good degrees of cover in different directions. There's another one back here covering the the American right hand approach, and one of their jump off points, the objective in fact, is back here though, on the road, which is yes, that's the objective for today. The Americans, if they can take and hold this jump off point by the end of a turn, then they win. Okay, the other way they win is by breaking the Germans. The Germans will just be trying to prevent them from doing that. Any other result? Victory for the Germans, basically. Okay, yeah, I rolled for force morale, both sides equal this time, both on a force morale of 9 each. So yeah, no excuses for either side. Okay, and yeah, let's get to it. The Americans, as the attackers, will be activating first, and I'm gonna see what we can get. They'll be looking to get up the board before it gets too clogged with German guns. Okay, I'm a few activations in, and yeah, there's quite a bit to recount. The Americans started, of course, they've been trying to drive up the board. They've deployed a squad and moved him out. A senior leader has come out alongside the mortar, and another squad has just deployed over here to try and even, give them options, make sure the Germans can't just concentrate on one side of the board. And the Stuart has appeared as well. For the Germans, they deployed a squad which they've been moving up from back here, trying to get into this building, but I think it's a bit of a forlorn hope to do that now. But the further back they can pin the Americans down, the more chance they have of holding out, basically. They deployed the infantry gun here, and it's been shooting at the American squad back over here, and finally they got the 222 on, because I figured get it on before it was too late, because it had to deploy down the road where any American tanks can just blow it up. So yeah, but in terms of action, we've had quite a bit. Like I said, this German squad's been moving. This building has been both sides trying to reach it, but I don't think they're going to quite make it. Either side's going to make it safely, let's be honest, because the doors are in the exposed sides. But yeah, the German infantry gun opened fire and has actually killed a few Americans from this squad. In retaliation, the Americans used the mortar, and actually in one singular shot managed to kill 3 of the crew in a pretty impressive piece of firing. So yeah, the 222 appeared on the board, had a quick snapshot at the Stuart on the American side, stunning the gunner before zipping around the corner to get away from any retaliation. And that's basically where we are so far. So I'm going to go away, do a few more activations, and we'll see how it's going. Both sides are accruing points towards their chain of command to see if who gets there first. The battle continues, and yeah, more mortar fire has poured down upon this poor infantry gun on the German side, killing the last remaining crew member. So it's the junior leader now manning the gun, taking 1 point of shock. He has pulled back into cover to try and prevent damage to the German force morale by him being either routed or killed. So yeah, he's pretty much neutralised that gun effectively until the Americans poke their heads out a bit more. The race towards the building continues as the Americans here have poked their heads round, started firing at the couple of exposed Germans here and doing a 1 point of shock, daring the Germans to come round the corner to, well, the German squads have overall more firepower but less mobility, so if the Germans come round the corner, the Americans will be able to shoot them a bit better before the Germans can really do much. So yeah, and if either side goes into close combat with the other, it's basically going to be a bloodbath, and the Americans can afford to lose a squad at the to kill it in order to kill a German one, whereas the Germans really can't afford that great of attrition in this game. So it's overall being a bit more bold suits the Americans at this stage. The Stuart has zipped up the board, it's moved flat out in its last chance, so it's looking to capitalise on its high speed to really get in there and survive, basically. But yeah, it's trying to tease German guns out so it can it can sort of like do its thing. Okay, and yeah, the American squad over here has been a bit stymied by poor movement rolls, but it will. The Americans are overall making fairly good progress up the board. While the Germans have sensibly decided to pull back a little bit into the cover of these rock ruins here, and allowing the Americans to zip forwards. But they have set themselves on overwatch in case the Americans try to jump from cover to cover and annoy them. Basically, the Americans decided not to go into the building, because there's not very good fields of fire from within it, and this just seems to be setting them up to be stuck there for the entire game when they really should be trying to attack. Let's see, oh yes, the poor hapless infantry gun here in its debut game has copped it. A mortar round from the incredibly deadly 60mm American mortar back here managed to finish them off with another round. It must have guided mortar bombs or something on it. And the junior leader bought the farm, and unfortunately did some damage to the German platoon force morale, because it counts as a support choice gone and a junior leader killed, so not a good hit there. And as you can see in the far background, the Americans have finally got their marching boots on and are marching up. So Germans have had opportunities to deploy more models, but they're not taking them at this point because it's just a little bit too risky at this point. They want to keep their cards close to their chest and let Americans onto them so they can gun them down as and when the time comes. Okay. The Americans have decided to use their first chain of command point. They finally generated a whole one, and they moved the jump off point from here all the way into the ruins. So they really looks like they're concentrate on the left hand side. As you can see, their unit has infiltrated into the woods now, and that will bring pressure on the Germans. But speaking of pressure, the Germans have now revealed everything. A huge strong point has appeared inside this building because the Americans are getting rather too close to their own jump off point, couldn't afford to let them do it, so they deployed their remaining squad in the ruins of this building just here, opening fire on the advancing Americans, only causing a buttload of shock though. No kills, just a lot of shock on both teams in the American rifle squad. And even the pack has decided to make an entrance, opening fire on the Stuart and missing amazingly. Surprise, couldn't hit that that range. Kind of lucky for the Stuart though. Well, very lucky for the Stuart. Yes, and the Germans have deployed their only senior commander there, and that's a big deal in chain of command because they know, but they have only got one last team to bring on, and that's the Panzer Schreck team, which they're keeping back. So yeah, that's it. The Germans have now shown their full hand. They have a squad over here, a squad here, so they are very much trying to control the middle of the board. They've got good arcs of fire all round, and we'll see if the Americans can break down this defence now. But yes, Germans have now had to reveal their hand, which could be quite decisive for chain of command. Well, seeing a 755mm pack suddenly open fire to its front caused the Stuart to slew off the road and seek cover behind this building here before the Germans could reload and get another bead on them, saving himself, I expect. But no firing done by the Stuart yet. It's just been trying to zoom around it. Well, it has actually teased out the existence of the German pack gun in the building here, so that's good for him. The game continues. The senior leader has caught up with the squad here, who are sort of not so much pinned down as such, but they're not willing to move out against a German squad on full overwatch pointing at them. It's not generally conceived as sporting in the grand scheme of things. What has happened, however, is the other American squad has deployed from the jump-off point into the ruins here with the remaining American senior leader, and between them the squad that's in the forest and the Germans inside the building, a big firefight has erupted at close range. In chain of command, it's everything's within 18 inch, which is very close range, and unfortunately for the Germans, they're getting the worst of it overall. The American ability to use semi-automatic fire to re-roll ones, and the sheer number of models they have is taking a toll. The Germans have lost a man off of the machine gun team, a couple of men off of the rifle team, and all they're doing really is putting out shock in return. It's just not, the dice have not been with the Germans on this one occasion. And yeah, they have wounded the junior leader, the squad leader of the American squad in the forest, but it's really not enough on its own to hold back. And they really, I mean, the dice could go the other way soon, and yeah, the Americans could start taking big losses and stuff. But at this point in time, yeah, the Americans really do have the edge in this firefight. But we're just about to go back to the Germans' activations and see what they can do. In future activations, the more or less stalemate on the right-hand side of the American advance continues, as the Americans can't just seem to activate that Stuart to move. Unfortunately, just not getting those threes to activate junior leaders, unfortunately. So yeah, they can't really bring the Stuart round to support any advance along here, so they're kind of stuck waiting, a bit of a traffic jam. But everything's happening on the American left advance. The firefight continued on. The Germans brought the 222 around the corner to add its weight, just trying to throw anything into this firefight to turn the tide, and actually did manage to start killing Americans in the wood. But yeah, the Germans inside the building decided they just had enough. It was getting close for them to actually getting pinned and eventually, well, just overwhelmed by firepower. So in their just gone activation, they took as much shock off as possible with the senior leader and the junior leader, and just moved out the other side of the building. A two-man light machine gun team and a two-man rifle squad with a junior leader is all that managed to limp out of that building, carrying a little bit of shock still. But yeah, that's all they've got, and the pack in there is holding the building on its own. Not sure how well it will do when it's got the full firepower of the Americans to face it. But yeah, that's that. But it's better than losing the squad altogether. Yes, absolutely. Germans just can't afford to do that. Need to be a bit more careful, and the presence of the 222 should hold up the Americans from just doing whatever they want on this flank. The Americans finally brought the Stuart up, prompting the Germans to use their first chain of command dice they accrued to use their ambush with their Panzerschreck, which opened fire and rolled a 4 on 2 dice, missing completely, which is annoying for them, again, to say the least. But yeah, that's another scare for the Stuart. He's obviously doing ready. It's obviously kissed by Lady Luck today, but yeah, there you go. The Germans continue to fall back around the back of the building with their squad. Ooh, take that piece of shock off. The Packers engaged in a firefight using HE against the American squad, killing and inflicting some shock. The Puma, for its part, has joined the firefight as well. The Americans are firing upon the pack. They started to take attrition on the crew. So yes, overall a big firefight developing, but we'll see which side will break first. Things really hotting up now as the Stuart finally pushes its way around the corner to block line of sight to the Americans. It sprays a bit of fire at the Germans, does nothing at all really. The Americans here have now assaulted into the Panzerschreck team and killed them after a very quick, brutal hand-to-hand combat. They took the position, then got hit by the Overwatch fire from the German squad, losing a couple more men in the ensuing bout of bullets, and but they've nonetheless taken the hard cover here, which will be good for them, and we'll see. So now we have a firefight developing all along the front, and both sides giving each other hell. The pack is firing HE into the building. However, it's been reduced to 2 crew members down from its 5, just the junior leader and one other guy. Meanwhile, the damage done by the 222 armoured car is really hurting the American squad in the woods here. So yeah, both sides taking hits to their force morale to one degree or another, but the Germans feeling the worst of it on that score. But we'll see. All they've got to do is defend now. Well, its luck couldn't last forever. The Stuart has been destroyed by a Panzerfaust from the German squad inside the building. Yeah, finally its number was up. A roll of 11 to hit was not going to be dodged by the light tank this time, and it was a very simple set of rolls to blow it up. Unfortunately, it has not good armour, but there you go. The Germans in here have now engaged in a firefight with the Americans inside the building. Neither side really exerting much damage upon the other, though. Over here, though, the firefight has really shifted against the Germans now, with the inclusion of the Sherman tank rolling onto the battlefield now, and using its very impressive HE rounds to finish off the pack in one round of fire, and killed the last two crew in the building, allowing the Americans to move across from the woods here. And yeah, it's just it's start really turning the tide against the Germans. Their force morale has now dropped to 2, which is pretty awful, to be perfectly honest. The Germans around the corner here, well, they were on Overwatch pointing this way, expecting the Americans to move around, but the death of the pack gun in the building meant that they didn't have to worry about that anymore. But yeah, so just the Germans really up against it now, but not that many unit models left to move, so we'll see if their reduced command dice is really a big handicap for them. And yes, it was a handicap. The 3 dice really came up with nothing they could use, annoyingly. A 6, which does nothing, a 5, which has their chain of command dice, and a 4, which is their senior leader, who's only really in range of the depleted squad, unfortunately. He didn't really have the wherewithal to get anywhere else. And not safely anyway, crossing this road in front of a Sherman tank and the mortar and a squad which could gun him down just didn't seem like a good way to earn his Knight's Cross, to be perfectly honest. So didn't do it. Decided not to do it. That then activation passed to the Americans, who rolled, got at least 1-3 came up. The Sherman happens to be in perfect line of sight of the 222 armoured car and destroyed it with a super placed shot. Rolled a 6 to hit, which is an aimed crack shot, which it really didn't quite need for the purposes of the 222 armoured car, but wrecked it in one round. This Sherman has just styled its way onto the board. Not often a Sherman can claim to be the big boy in a World War II game, but yeah, he certainly is this time, and he moved up and just took out 2 of the German support options, dropping their force morale to 0, which means that the Germans will be leaving the board and leaving the battlefield and losing the game. The Americans have taken quite some damage. They've some casualties to be looked at by the medical personnel. Unfortunately, a brave Stuart tank has paid the price for its recklessness, but they have managed to keep the momentum of the advance up. Yeah, although they didn't capture the jump-off point they needed to, it counts if the enemy breaks and runs off the board. So that's a win for the Americans in my book by any means. Especially with the material that the Germans have lost. The Germans would be falling back. I guess these guys would make it off the board. I don't know if these ones would. They all try their best to fall back and rejoin the rest of their forces, but I just don't know. The Americans are actually in good enough shape. I think they'd be able to pursue them and possibly round them up and capture them, to be perfectly honest. And or unfortunately, such is war, shoot them as they attempt to withdraw across the open terrain. But who knows? I mean, that's for your grisly imagination to imagine with. But yeah, that was a good game. Quite good to actually have. I like this. Actually, playing lengthways is actually quite good, and I do like some of the new scenery I got for my board. I do like this field. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Let's wrap up with the view of what happened at the Falaise Gap. The Falaise Gap remains a controversial subject to this day, in that in some areas it was heralded even at the time as a missed opportunity by the Allies. Tens of thousands of Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS escaped, including many a senior staff whose continued presence would be felt in later campaigns. Meanwhile, there doesn't appear to have been any great sense of victory on the German side either. Certainly this was no Dunkirk on the home front. Germany's fortress Europe had been breached irrevocably, opening up yet another front. In my humble opinion, I think it's another case of over-ambitious goals for the Allies, not an uncommon feature in the northwestern theatre. The German 7th Army certainly wasn't routing, and many seem to forget that the Axis forces were not panicked at escaping encirclements, these being previously done on the Eastern Front, for which the Allied generals could not have been practised at. The commanders on the Allied side seemed to understand that the battle was theirs to lose, and as long as they didn't take great risks, some magnitude of victory could be achieved, which probably encouraged a degree of caution on their part. Nonetheless, looking at the Battle of Normandy as a whole, it's hard not to see a decisive Allied victory here, especially considering the entire campaign concluded ahead of the predicted schedule as well. Anyway, I'm Shieldwall100, and I hope that you enjoyed this battle report. Ta-ta for now.